Episode 6 of Breaking, Building, and Belonging, the podcast where we explore stories of transformation in the search for improving our growth mindset. We want to form and improve our connections to build a better life, and I'd like to help you with that. I'm your host, John Johnson, and the author of this book. Today's episode is another deeply personal one. It's a dark one, just like the previous character portrait that we shared, and I'll be reading a chapter called Bullies, Blades, and Buoys. This chapter takes us through moments from my childhood, again, times marked by loneliness, heavy challenges, but it also talks unexpectedly of glimmers of hope from the unlikeliest of places. So as I read, what I want you to do is reflect on people, places, or even the smallest gestures that you've come across in your life that served as buoys for you, keeping you afloat when the waves felt overwhelming. I would take the bus in the middle school because walking or biking was too far. I'd hear, "Here comes Dorky." The biggest of the bullies would often belt that out as I approached. He towered over me and acted like I was unworthy of addressing as a fellow human. Instead, he would engage someone else, usually the local Baptist preacher's son. "Hey, Tim, is this your boyfriend?" Slightly bigger and starting to fill out, Tim was a friendly enough kid who tried to befriend me at first, but that didn't last long. I'm unsure if it was the bullies at the bus stop, Tim's parents, or Tim himself that ended that. It seemed to flounder after only a few awkward visits to their bus stop and church-adjacent parish residents. Incidentally, that rejection was beneficial in reaffirming my doubts about a higher power. Not everyone was mean, though. Some kids in school would give me money for pencils or paper. However, they were often nowhere to be found when the others teased me, and some other kids in the free lunch line. These particular bullies at school would throw change in the urinals to see if I or we would retrieve it. And the money appealed to me because I wanted to sell my free lunch. If I could scrounge up 25 cents and keep the milk, I could trade what passed for food pyramid nutrition or a milkshake. This concoction was nothing more than ice, chocolate syrup, and a low-fat dairy-adjacent liquid. But it felt like it was one that the rich kids had when I was able to do that. This might be me. "Hey, rich kid, I'll trade you this Mexican pizza and my sides for a quarter if you let me keep the milk." Of course, I didn't call them Rich Kid. I used their name if I knew it. The kids I called rich lived in houses the size of my in-laws' bottom floor apartment today. They were, in fact, not rich, but middle class back when the economic divides were not as extreme as they are nowadays. A few of these middle class, NASA job parented kids were my friends, or at least they tried to be. It was hard to hang out with them. Many of them lived in the same neighborhood as one another, but we lived on the other side of town. Our car rarely had gas, and we had no phone in our home to coordinate visits or pickups. Despite all the roadblocks, I have to credit my mom for getting me to their houses multiple times. Even if I only had 5 or 6 visits over 2 summers, those encounters helped me escape from my surroundings and glimpse a different life. One friend, Bill, invited me over to his pool where I could teach myself how to swim. And after a few visits, I managed to learn how to dog paddle my way to the edge out of sheer fear of drowning, or perhaps it was fear of embarrassment. And as kind as they were, it just became impractical to hang out consistently. I had to find friends who lived closer. The town's marina was down the road from the bus stop and my house. I admired my friends who lived on a sailboat there. They were just as kind as the rich kids, and their home would go anywhere. They had an entire marina to goof off in, and food in their little mini fridge below deck. "Hey, Kip, do you think we could make peanut butter and jelly like we did the other day?" "Yeah, John. I bet we have some cocoa and sugar, too. We can get some ice and make a milkshake." Kip knew how to speak my faux milkshake love language. Kip and his 3 siblings had 2 parents, and they ate dinner as a family every night. Their sailboat was clean and well maintained, but it was not going to be reviewed by Robin Leach on the lifestyles of the rich and famous or featured on MTV Cribs. One night, I recall waiting on the back deck while the family ate together in the cabin below. Kip came out to talk to me. He looked mortified. Uh, John, Dad said you can't wait out here. You need to come back tomorrow. I understood that they didn't want to make a habit of having to feed me all the time. There was only so much room down there. I'm sure they felt my family was responsible for feeding me. It was also their family time, and I didn't want to intrude. Kip's dad was like many dads back then. He would come home from a long day at work and barely talk to me. He always seemed tired and grumpy. I still have no idea what he thought of this kid who would constantly scavenge off his family. I'm sure he had empathy beyond what he conveyed. The captain of the marina locked ship was a good dad, and his wife and kids loved him. As a father of three young men, I now understand Kip and Tim's dad's reactions to me on a deeper level. The person a kid hangs around the most shapes them into who they become and how they perceive themselves. They both wanted better for their sons than hanging out with a kid like me. From the outside, I must have looked like everything they were trying to steer their young 80s men away from. Neither took the time to get to know me on the inside. Back then, who knows what layers of awkwardness they would have had to push past to get to know the real me. In the 1980s, this was not the practice of most dads I knew. TV dads were the opposite. They took in the goofy kid next door. The real life dads I was exposed to were not in the habit of talking to their kids' friends, let alone other people's kids. Dads aside, in stark contrast to Tim, like the buoys undulating and clanging just outside the marina's entry point, Kip was there for me. Kip bobbed in and out of the hatch of his sailboat, happy to see me and excited for our next adventure. He was patient and popped in and out of my friendship circle just as quickly. My, more than likely, clinically depressed brain and emotions would only allow so much closeness before I pushed him away. He was younger than me by a couple of years, but we were kindred spirits on multiple levels. It was a great match, considering I was slightly less mature than the boys at the bus stop, and Kip was too mature to want to hang out with his younger brother. Of course, that didn't stop his kid brother from following us around everywhere we went. In short, Kip was my best friend. He was my ally both in the backwoods of our neighborhoods and in all the turmoil of my day-to-day life. He was loyal and trustworthy. We set up forts, and I, mostly, watched him play video games at the arcade, because games cost money back then. We played Dungeons and Dragons, D&D, again, he bought the books. We dreamed of seeing D&D characters, comic books, and movie scenes brought beyond the puppet and string stage to the authentic live-action depictions closer to our imaginations, like the ones that they have today. When I desperately needed to escape my dangerous bus stop and free lunch line reality, Kip provided a portal to another world. And after Mom pawned my bike, he walked with me. When my stomach was rumbling loudly, he fed me. When I needed someone to complain to about all my problems, he listened and commiserated the best he could. Kip was a buoy, a way marker, showing the way out to a broader sea of possibilities when all I wanted to do was drown. Thank you for spending time with me on Breaking, Building, and Belonging. As you go about your day, I hope this story inspires you to reflect on the moments and people that have helped you stay afloat during life's storms. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can share them in the comments or DM me on social media at 4for Soaring. That's FOUR, the number 4, SOARING. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Speaking of that, in our next episode, we'll reflect on the lessons from this chapter and dive into ways we lean on our support systems to navigate the messiness of life. Reminder, those are our reflections on reality chapters. Until then, look for the buoys in your life, and let's keep soaring together.